Hello there, wandering wanderers. Just a couple of announcements before we dive into this week's episode. I have a lovely American lady called Tracy who is going to be walking the Camino Francés and stopping in Oreson, which is the albergue halfway up the first climb, on September 16th, 2020. So that's September the 16th, 2020. She's looking for a walking buddy. So if you're going to be in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port staying at Oreson the same time, September the 16th, please send a PM to our Facebook page, Camino de Santiago Pilgrims Podcast, and I'll put you in touch with Tracy so you can walk together. The other thing I'd like to mention is, are you a pilgrim that's walked the Camino de Santiago? Could be any of the Caminos. If so, please send us a message on our Pilgrims Podcast Facebook page, because I would love to interview you. I'm always looking for new guests for the podcast, and as a thank you, I will give you a copy of my Camino de Santiago memoir, The Only Way is West. It's a bestseller in the humorous essays and travelogue categories in the UK, in Australia and Canada, and also a bestseller in sports essays, ecotourism and literary travel in the USA. So please get in touch, and like I said, as a thank you, I'll give you a free copy of my book, The Only Way is West, which currently on Amazon has 73 reviews and 4.8 out of 5. So that's the announcements over with. Let's get into the podcast.
A wandering wanderer, a life adventurer, said he's a secrets philosopher. He's a wandering wanderer.
Hello there once again, wandering wanderers. Welcome to El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims Podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation and packing for walking the road to Santiago, as well as tips, tricks and hacks to make your journey on the road to Santiago a lot more enjoyable. We're going to take the grim out of the pilgrimage, put more bounce in your boots, more K's in your days. To that end, we have an amazing lady with us this week that has walked the Camino 10 times. Not only that, she is the owner of the famous, the celebrated, the albergue that's been mentioned 3 times on this podcast and has 4.6 out of 5 and 128 reviews on Google. It's the one and only Susi from Casa. Susi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Bradley. I love that intro. It's amazing.
It's cheesy, isn't it? I did warn you.
No, it's brilliant.
I just can't stop myself every time I say I shouldn't do it, but I end up doing it. So 10 Caminos, Susi.
Yes, I did. I did my first Camino in 2012, and for the next 3.5 years, I managed to walk at least 10 Caminos. And they were all full Caminos from various places. And there was a few small things going on there because I was looking for a home to turn into an albergue, which meant I walked a lot more than that, actually.
So what Camino routes have you walked, just so you can amaze the listeners?
Okay, so the Camino Francés was my first and my second. They were done in the space of... The first one was at the end of May 2012 into the June, and then I didn't like it too much. In fact, hate's a really big word and not one I use very often, but I actually quite hated it in the beginning. And I thought, why would anybody ever do this again? When I was meeting people that said, it's my second or third, I'm like, these people are absolutely crazy. No one could do it more than once. And after 26 days of this dislike and wanting to leave, I realised actually when I got to Osobrero and I could almost taste Santiago in the distance, that I wanted to start walking 1 step forward and 5 back, because I didn't want it to end. And that was a bit overwhelming at the time. And I completely changed because suddenly I was, how do I not get to the end, but how do I get to the end? So it was, I was battling myself. You want to finish, but you don't. And I didn't quite finish because I got to Santiago and then I said, no, I need to keep going, Museum Finisterre. So that was amazing. And then in the September, October of the same year, I did it all over again just to make sure I loved it as much as I thought I did, which I did. And the next one was the Camino del Norte. And then I was back on the Francés for another 2. Then I walked from La Puy in France, and then I walked from Lisbon in Portugal, then back onto the Francés, and then the Primitivo, and then the rest were the Francés. I did a few Museum Finisteras again in there, but I don't really count those as full Caminos. They were just part of what I was doing.
So you went from hating it for the first 26 days and then ending up spending pretty much the best part of the next few years walking Caminos.
Absolutely.
What changed your mind? Was it a certain encounter, certain event, or it just grew on you slowly?
No, my main problem why I disliked it was I had extremely bad feet. And thinking about it now, I can't believe I didn't go to a shop, change my boots, walk in sandals, something. But I persisted in wearing these same boots, which were incredible, but obviously not for my foot. And in fact, when I did my second Camino, I thought, I must have worn them in now. I've walked over 1,000 kilometres in these, so I took them again, and the same thing happened. I had extremely bad blisters, though at that point I was learning what to do when I had bad blisters. So my dislike of it was actually my feet, and in each morning I would just cry, putting my feet into my shoes. And once I warmed up, which was about 2 or 3 kilometres, that was okay, but I couldn't stop. So I didn't stop for any breaks. I just got to wherever I was going to and then removed my shoes, knowing that I wouldn't be able to get them back on. So, yeah, the dislike was that. And though they were still bad after 26 days, it was the people that were travelling, were pulling me along the Camino. It was the pilgrims that were next to me that I met that kept me going to the end. And eventually, I think my 4th Camino was the first Camino where I didn't have a problem with my feet, and that was purely because I changed over to a pair of Nikes. And I think that's the Camino I felt like I had wings on my feet, on my ankles, and I flew along the Camino.
I can definitely empathise with that as well. Since my first few Caminos, I had terrible blisters. Then I did change to a pair of Nikes throughout one of my Caminos, and ever since then I've never looked back. And what I'd like to do, if that's okay with you, is in a little bit tap into what you learn from the problems with your feet. So anyone that's walking the Camino and does have problems or is going to, they kind of can learn from your own experiences. But please take us back to how and where you first heard of the Camino and why you decided to walk it in the first place.
So I've always been a really great traveller. I was a great traveller who liked 5-star hotels and pools and cocktails and happy hours. They were my normal holidays. I loved that. I had a flower shop. I worked extremely hard, and so I rewarded myself also from that. And that was fantastic. And so I was travelling to Paris one year and loved reading travel books. So grabbed a pile of travel books at the airport to take to Paris. And I picked up a book. This was in 2007. And I was going to see the rugby in Paris. And I picked up a book called The Year We Seized the Day. And it was by an Australian woman and an English guy that had walked the Camino together. And it was horrific at the time when I first read it. But in actual fact, and I still have the book, it actually is probably a very good example of what the Camino is, because all the bad things that happened to this couple. Anything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and anything you can't even imagine could happen did happen to these two people. And I read it and I thought, why would anybody do that? Why would anybody put themselves through that for a holiday? Anyway, I put it aside. Pleased I read it. Knew I was never going to do it at the time. I don't know, a year or so later, I was travelling with the same boyfriend and he didn't have a book. I said, I'll read that book. And so he took it and didn't say anything about it. But a few months later, he got up one day and said, the relationship's over, I'm going to walk the Camino. And I was really quite angry. It's like, it's my book, that's my journey. I didn't voice that. And yes, the relationship did finish. I didn't want to have anything to do with him after that. But months after he finished his Camino, with no contact, he did call me to say that he really wanted to be back in a relationship with me. He hadn't stopped thinking about me on the Camino. And I battled it for a bit. We did get back together, and it did fail again. And when it failed, in my head, all I could think about was, what was it about his journey that made him want to be back with me? What happened on that journey? And I want to do that journey. I felt it was a healing thing for me, not really knowing why. And so in my head, I decided I was going to walk the Camino. And it was a matter because I had a flower shop. I needed somebody to run it. I wanted an indefinite amount of time. I didn't want any time stipulations. I actually didn't believe I was ever going to get to the end, but I thought I'll give it a go. And so in 2011, I started planning. It was July. I got one of my girlfriends said she'd run the shop for me, and I prepared to go back for 3 months in the following May of 2012. And so that was the beginning of the adventure in many ways. And even at that time, there wasn't a lot of things on the internet. It wasn't social media like it is now. I didn't have a book. I didn't have a guidebook, didn't know what John Briley's book was, and just thought, I'll just begin. And him and his brother had also walked the Camino. They were the only people I knew, and I wasn't going to ask either of those two what it was all about. So I went in with blinkers. And I think that was a good thing for me.
And it's changed your life ever since, obviously, because you've ended up owning Casa, Susi. And it's interesting that it all started just with you picking up that book in Paris, the year we seized the day. You gave it to your ex-boyfriend, who ended up walking it and going on Camino. It's a bit of a sod's law, that one, isn't it? But it's like, I give you the book and then you end the relationship and then go and walk it. And then him walking it piques your interest and what he learned from it. And then fast forward to 2012, you're walking it kind of, just on a whim, just more being drawn to it than having a specific reason. You just felt like you had to do it. And I know there's a lot of listeners in Australia that are listening to the podcast. Could you please just tell them how you made your way to the starting point at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port?
In fact, I've made different routes there, but my first one was I was in the UK with my parents, and I wanted to take them on a trip before I did my trip. And so we decided to go to Barcelona, and I realised that that was not a bad place for me to get to Pamplona by a plane, and then I could get private transfer from Pamplona to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. But my second time, I was also in London. London's a pretty good base for getting into Spain. And so my second time, I went from Stansted in England to Biarritz. And basically there's a bus outside the front door that gets you there quite rapidly to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. There's also a train. I know a lot of other Aussies come in and out of Paris because the train system works for them as well, coming down from there. And when I did the Del Norte, I went in, also flew out of London, but that was a bit round the houses. That was to Madrid, and then a connecting small flight up to San Sebastian. So we've got many ways out of England. These little airports that are close by, Ryanair flies to most of those.
Yeah. So various different ways to get to the starting point if you are coming from Australia. You did mention Barcelona, then to Pamplona, then getting a bus or a train from Pamplona. There's also, you could fly into London, then take a connecting flight with probably Ryanair from London Stansted to Biarritz. Then you could get like the Express Buricot to the start from there. And London's also a great place, an international hub, as well as Barcelona and Madrid for any Australian pilgrims, or in fact anyone travelling subcontinental. So great stuff. Now we're going to move on to, I think you'd be very well qualified, obviously, since you are the master of the house at Casa Susi in Galicia. Or as you would say, I can hear you've got the perfect peninsulan accent there. You would say Galicia. I live in Tenerife where they don't use that sound, the th-th-th. But yeah. Any advice you can give on adjusting to albergue life? Because it's a massive change, and it sounds like you may have had some... How was it for you when you first walked the Camino?
I like white sheets. I like white fluffy towels. I like slippers in my room. And suddenly I'm about to share a bunk with people that I don't know.
Lovely.
So I started in St. Jean. So when I got to Pamplona, what I had decided to do was to spend 2 days in a hostel in Pamplona before going to St. Jean-Pied-de-Port, because I thought if I couldn't get through those 2 days with not knowing anybody, there was pointless me getting to St. Jean-Pied-de-Port. So I thought, let's try 2 days here and see how I go. And so I was I don't sound timid and shy, but at the time I was quite timid and shy. And I went to this hostel, the Hemingway Hostel, I think it was called, in Pamplona, and they put me in a room with 2 bunks, so 4 beds. And there was no one there, and that was okay. I left my backpack, which I was still trying to adjust to. It wasn't on wheels. Why would anyone take something with no wheels on a holiday? And so, I wandered around and I cried a lot. And I called my daughter, who lives in Sydney, who's my best friend. And, Mum, why are you crying? What's happened? And I was like, I don't want to do this. This is terrible. It's the worst decision. I should be down in Ibiza on a beach and enjoying myself. And she said, maybe if I tell you something, it might change your mind. She said, we're actually sort of having bets on what day you're going to leave. And I'm like, what? Stop the tears very quickly. And she said, yeah, all of us are sort of, and she's friends with all my friends, it's like 2 days, 3 days. And I was like in shock that these people had been talking that I was never going to make it. And she said to me, what's the worst that can happen, Mum? When you begin, what's the longest you would have to go without being able to leave? And I thought, okay, well, I'm starting St. Jean-Pied-de-Port. I've got to get back to Pamplona because then I can fly anywhere. And I said, 3 days. And she said, so the absolute worst thing that can happen to you is you've got to do this for 3 days and then you can leave. And it made a lot of sense to me. And I said, yeah, absolutely, but I'm gonna go and do this. And that made that slightly easier. But that evening when I went back to the hostel, there was nobody in my room except there was 3 really big pairs of boots. And I was like, oh, no, there's men in this room, and they're the biggest men, obviously, in the world because they've got these massive boots. I do have a small foot. And so I curled up in my bunk, in my little sleeping liner, with the lights out, and suddenly these 3 guys came through the door that just filled the doorway, quite happily, merry, I wouldn't say drunk, South African and Irish, loud, obnoxious, boisterous, and amazing. And they put on the light and they were, oh, sorry, and turned it off, and they were actually on their Camino, so they had started a couple of days previously. We talked until the early hours of the morning, until we all fell asleep. It had gone 4 o'clock. And it was incredible, and I was feeling something special with these men that I didn't know, of sleeping with strangers in a strange place in a communal living space, but it was warming me. And funny enough, those men only got my name and that I had a flower shop in Rose Bay and the name of the flower shop. And the next morning they had gone. And I still had another day before I began, so I was never going to catch them. But 6 months after I finished, I got a random email going, we hope you're the Susi we met in the bunk room. We were the South African and Irish. And now they're 2 of my best friends. So I didn't even walk with them, but they found me. And I think, yeah, that's one of my very heartwarming stories. In fact, I had goosebumps just thinking about these 2 men. They have since changed their life, and due to what I've done, they've also bought something on the Primitivo.
Wow.
And so their journey has begun. They've been there a year preparing it.
You guys, you sound like you guys are living the life I've kind of got one eye on living, because I've just sold my house in Tenerife as well. I'm like, right, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? Am I going to open an albergue somewhere along the way as well? Thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. But what's interesting about your stories, you've got a bit of you've had a love-hate relationship with the Camino, like from the start, by the sounds of it, even from when you first heard of it, and your boyfriend, took off and went and walked it, and you're crying on the first night, and then you're getting so much warmth from the camaraderie and the rapport and the relationships that you build with pilgrims. If someone else is feeling that way in the hostels when they first start, it can be quite lonely. It can be quite daunting as well, and for some people might dread the prospect of sharing sleeping space with so many people in such close quarters. What advice would you give to someone to get through that and over that? It's a psychological barrier more than anything at the start, isn't it?
Yes. Well, what ended up happening, when I left Pamplona, I then went to St. Jean Pied de Port, and I was also in a hostel there. But I knew my next day was my start day, and in the back of my head, I hadn't walked. I didn't know if I was going to get up and over that mountain. And so pre all of this, me thinking the worst of what was going to happen to me, I had decided to book the very posh hotel in Roncesvalles. And I thought, if I get there, I can just weep in my room on my own, and that's okay. At least I'm going to get up and over and have some reward for what I've just done. And in fact, that's my biggest mistake and also my best mistake, because I did start walking the next day and I did get up and over and I survived it. So that's my first ever hike, was that day.
Well done, you.
And it was the loneliest place to be that night, because everybody went off to the monastery to check in and I went to the hotel alone. Mm-hmm. And the crying was because I was alone, because I wanted to be with everybody else. And that was the biggest lesson I think I learned, was that. As it was after dinner, a woman said to me, look, I can't do this in the hostel. Can I come and stay in your room? And I had spare beds. Absolutely. And because the next day I was so happy I was going to a hostel. And so I did a 360 or a 180 maybe. Absolutely changed how I felt about that. But I wanted to be with those people that were like me, the pilgrims.
Yeah, so to embrace it, what you're saying is actually be with your tribe and get as most out of that as possible. I mean, I had exactly the same thing when I last walked the Camino. I was on the Portuguese in December with my wife, and we had a couple of nights in hotels because I'd had a terrible night's sleep. And after a couple of nights in the hotels, one, I felt guilty that I wasn't doing the Camino in its true spirit, which is not necessarily true. But two, more importantly, I was missing the contact with my fellow pilgrims, missing the stories and missing the laughter and the camaraderie. And that's definitely softens the blow of the Spartan surroundings often of the Camino. And often you just go to bed laughing or smiling because of a conversation you've had. And that's one of the best ways to get through it, is just to embrace it, really. That's in my opinion. What about your feet, Susie? Because I said we'd circle back to that. What was the cause of your blister and your feet problems at the start, and what did you learn from it? And what recommendations would you give to people so they don't suffer that?
Look, I read a lot about feet and blisters, and I don't think anything can prepare you when it comes to that. For the blisters. Would I recognise a hot spot on my foot now? Absolutely. Did I recognise a hot spot on my foot then? No, I didn't. I had no idea. When that little tingle comes, there's a little bit of redness, and it might be a blush, but that is going to turn into a blister at some point. My biggest thing I've discovered for the Camino was toe socks. But I didn't discover them until the third Camino, where actually my daughter discovered them. And that was brilliant for me, because separating my toes, where I had multiple blisters, makes a massive difference, having those. So I tried the cotton liners, the wool socks at the top, changing them to every 2 hours, putting Vaseline on before you begin, all of those things, you learn, I put Compeed on. Well, I think I kept Compeed in business the first year. Nobody else needed to buy anything. They must have been having a lot of holidays from the money I was spending. But I didn't understand Compeed. Compeed only works before the blister's there. And what happens if you put it on once there's a blister there, you're going to rip that blister off and have an open wound. And also, when your feet get hot, it likes to melt into your socks and your foot. So that's not great either. I saw a guy on my first Camino. He just wrapped his whole feet in duct tape every day. He didn't have a blister. He was protecting his feet. I'm sure they were very sticky when he removed it every day, mind you. I'm a big fan of sewing the blister. Now I've learned how to do it, and I'm often helping my pilgrims do that now. So that basically is draining the blister to allow the fluid to come out. So you leave a little bit of cotton in when you go through. There is no pain. That skin, when it's white on the top, is already dead. You're not going to have any pain. What causes you pain is that open skin underneath. So when you drain it, the skin stays on top of it that's already dead to protect that open wound. And that will eventually dry. Underneath will dry, and the top comes off, and you're good to go again.
I saw someone doing that. Yeah, I did see someone doing that.
Yeah, it's quite common.
I was intrigued by what the hell was going on, to be honest with you. And you just prick the blister, don't you? Or do you stick the needle right the way through the top of the skin?
So you put your cotton on. There's a knot at one end. You put it all the way through and out, and then you tie the other end. And so you leave that piece of thread in. Normally if I'm helping somebody, we normally try and do it as they're going to bed. And that will drain overnight. And then we do put mercurochrome or some antiseptic. So that will actually go through the cotton as well and will go under the skin to dry it. So, I clean it with that, and then I pour quite a bit of or even alcohol on top. So a little bit will go underneath. It stings for a second, and then it's all good. You leave that overnight, and in the morning all you should do is, put maybe a little bit of gauze and some tape over. You've got to be careful, because the slightest thing that changes your walking pattern will cause another blister. I mean, in everyday life, we don't have that. But when you're doing 30, 40 kilometres every single day, there is no relief. And that's why blisters can come and do come.
So we often talk about blister prevention, but what you're saying is if you actually already have the blister and you're past that point, then this is a way to actually deal with it and use that technique, I guess, of threading the needle through, putting the thread through, the sterilized thread as well, not just any piece of string you find on the floor, obviously a sterilized thread, and then you put the gauze on it in the morning. Do you put like an antiseptic cream on the gauze as well, just to keep it clean?
No, I mean, normally the alcohol or antiseptic that you've put on, and normally a liquid form is the best one, I feel, with that. I think that's enough. And then I say to them, when you get to the hostel today, you're good to take out that thread. Or if it's come out in the morning, that's probably drained it enough. The problem is that the blister keeps coming because the water underneath keeps replenishing itself, the liquid that's underneath keeps replenishing, and that's what you don't want, because that keeps the blister going. So that thread is draining the fluid out, and by the morning, your blister should be flat. And you're good to go. All you need to do is protect it that day if you've left the thread in. But I normally say, get to wherever you're going today, remove everything, remove the thread, have a good shower, and then get as much air to your feet as possible.
Now your 10 Caminos to the good then. Let's flip that on its head, the what to do when you got a blister. What's your foot care routine?
I didn't really have a foot care routine. I do see people, with the talc and the Vaseline, and because it didn't work for me, once I discovered my toe socks and my Nikes, I didn't need a foot care routine.
Right.
I mean, it just purely was, I was good to go. All at the end of the day is, once I'd had my shower, the same thing, trying to air my feet, getting as much air, sun to them as possible.
Flip-flops.
Yeah, and I burnt my Birkenstocks, so I'd be in a pair of Birkenstocks. I was one of those, go into the shower with my Birkenstocks, and they've survived many showers. They didn't fall to pieces.
With your what, excuse me?
Birkenstocks.
I have no idea what they are.
Okay, they're not a flip-flop, so like, Havaianas or something. Yeah. And the reason I didn't have those, well, they're not so light, flip-flops. They've got a bit of weight in them, but they also have no support. And when you finish walking, you're still protecting your feet because they're going to get you to the end of your journey. And if you don't protect them, you've got some problems. So Birkenstocks, I think they're made by a German company. So they're similar to a flip-flop, but the base is cork and it's molded to support your foot. And they've got like a flip-flop base, but that the front over your toes is a bit like a flip-flop. But it's made of leather.
Right. I'll stick a link to that product on our Facebook page, Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, and you can have a look on there, as well as, of course, I'll put a link to Susi's albergue as well, Casa Susi, which has been spoken of many times on this podcast, and I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity, a Camino celebrity right now. So thanks a lot, Susi, for your energy, your personality, and your Camino wisdom as well. Speaking of that Camino wisdom, imagine you're going to get on the Camino tomorrow. You're packing your bag. What's going to be the first 3 things in your rucksack, apart from the obvious, the boots, the rucksack, and the socks?
My silk sleeping liner. I was very fond of that. A pillow slip, also another thing. So you can see this is all going around the sleep at the end of the day, can't you?
Clever. I like it, the pillow slip. I've not heard that one before. That's a new one.
I like the slip. Because you are fussy about what you want to put. I mean, you put your head on anything, but I'm also very conscious of the bed bugs, which we know are there. And so, and I don't want to use somebody else's pillow slip. So I think that's always a good one to have. Then my first 2, and what would my third? Well, my toe socks, I really do quite love them, as you can tell.
Have you got a specific brand that you use and you'd recommend?
I think it's called Inja.
Injinji, is it the Injinji ones? Yeah, they've been spoken of before. Injinji blister socks, toe socks.
Yeah,
so they're like gloves on your feet, aren't they, really?
Absolutely.
Foot gloves.
And they just embrace every little toe in their own little home, and I think they're absolutely. And my feet do go up. When I've done big full Caminos, obviously from La Puy or from Saint Jean Pied de Port to Santiago, my foot goes up about half a size.
Yep.
But of course, it doesn't start like that, does it? And sometimes with boots and leather, and they're not moving too much. I think that was my first boot. But with my Nikes, the material of your Nikes move around a bit, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I had a pair of Nikes on my last 2 Caminos, and it was a game changer for me, an absolute game changer. So I'd definitely recommend trying a few Nike kind of trail runners. They really help. So Injinji toe socks, your pillow slip, and I'm sorry, I was writing down the other one and I got sidetracked. What was the other one? Sorry, Susie?
Silk sleep liner.
Silk sleep liner, that was it. Okay, so just so you got a little bit of your home comforts there. Silk sleep liner. Happy days. Okay, well then, let's ask you another big question, and that is, you've travelled many, many, many miles on the Caminos, and I'm going to throw you a very difficult question here. What would be your favourite city, town or village that you'd recommend people go to? You've got to pick one.
So I'm not going to say Travadello where Casa Susi is, am I? As a walker, I think Burgos was my favourite city. Second would be Leon. I just have to put it in there because I loved those cities. I loved getting to them and exploring them. And I know I always took a day of rest, and that was the day that I went into the hotel and I went out late and relaxed and did all those things that I felt I was I rewarded myself in many ways. I mean, on that day of rest, I probably walked a Camino discovering the cities, but how can you not be there and continue to explore? I mean, yes, we're walking, but there's so much to see on the Camino Francés that I think for me, reaching Burgos was, a big milestone on my first Camino, and it was such an incredible city and the cathedral. And then once again, it's about 10 days in, and then you get to Leon. It's about, 20 days in, and I really enjoyed those places, and I still love them very much. And now I live really close to them. So I wasn't one of those that I wanted to sit in a little village and do nothing. I never had. And some people do that. We have lots of people that stay extra days with us for a day of rest because we're quite a relaxing home at Casa Susi. But I love the big cities.
Now, I've heard, speaking of Casa Susi, that you actually grow your own vegetables there.
We do. Yeah, big veg patch.
There's lots of reviews online talking about how amazing the meal is and how the atmosphere is amazing. You got people singing and playing music as well. So obviously this is one place that people definitely need to meet, and as we said before, has been spoken of many times along the way on this podcast. But is there anywhere else on the Camino you could recommend, as well as your own place, Casa Susi, that people stop and have a bite to eat? A specific restaurant, specific place?
Absolutely. My favourite restaurant, and I've not forgotten it, and I'm lucky I can go back to it now. So it's in Fonsabaden, which is just before the Cruz de Ferro, so where everyone leaves their little bit of home or their rock. So in that village, which when I went through in 2012 was still very abandoned, it's a little bit more commercialised now, and there's lots of talk about that various social media sites now, but it still has a bit of its old charm. But when you walk through there, there's a medieval restaurant, and it's incredible. And the guy is dressed as a hunter, and they do hunt their own meat there. I'm not a vegetarian, though Casa Susi is mainly vegetarian and vegan, because we all realise that when we walk the Camino, we are lacking a lot of vegetables. We don't see a lot of that, and so even non-vegetarians love eating with us because we're just serving, healthy food that they're missing from home, which we get a lot of. But this restaurant is medieval, beautiful candlesticks along the table with wax all over them, big long tables, communal eating, but the food is incredible. And the comparison in price from what we pay in Sydney for that same meal and what we would be paying in Spain, there's no comparison. So yes, that is my absolute favourite restaurant from 2012. I've always stopped there.
Do you know the name of that restaurant?
No.
Well, it's such a small place though, isn't it? Fonsabaden. And I read Shirley MacLaine's book on the Camino, and she calls it the abandoned village of wild dogs.
Because it was.
And I walked through there, I was like, oh God, I'm going to get bitten to death. What's going to happen to me? And nothing happened. So I was actually relieved about that. I did see a couple of dogs though, to be honest here, but I saw dogs everywhere. But okay, so there's a medieval restaurant in Fonsabaden that Susi recommends. Make sure you go there as you're passing through, and of course on your way to Casa Susi to try the homegrown veggies. Right, Susi, we're going to do a few quick fire questions now, okay? So short, sweet answers, and we'll run through them as quickly as possible to squeeze as much Camino knowledge from you as we possibly can. So, favourite Camino blog, vlog, book, or film?
Actually, it's all the same. So it's Margaret Caffin. She's Australian, and she's has become a friend, but she's the most amazing, inspirational woman who walked her first Camino when she was 59, and she wrote a book, and it's called Walking Back Home. But she also has a great Facebook page and a blog, and she's been last year she lived in Spain for 6 months learning Spanish in Santiago. So she's very entertaining, absolutely the top of my list.
Okay. Favourite food and or drink on the Camino?
Favourite drink, before 8 a.m. it would be cafe con leche.
Yeah.
At 2 o'clock, the icy cold rewarding beer. And I don't think you can go past that tortilla every day that you walk in the Camino.
You're only human.
Absolutely.
It's irresistible. One thing you wished you'd pack maybe on your first Camino?
I actually do think I wish I'd packed a little lavender oil. For many reasons. It works for lots of things, so you can put it on bites, but just the smell maybe on my pillowcase at night to drift me into a pleasant smelling environment. Maybe not what I was in at the time with feet and bodies in one space.
Yeah.
So if I could have put a little bit of that closer to me, I think I would.
They say the smells evoke such strong memories, don't they? That's a really good idea. That's a really, really good idea. One thing you didn't need and wouldn't take again?
A camera. My first Camino, I bought this amazing camera, and I actually dropped it before I got to Logroño, where it got sent back to where it came from. Because our phones are so amazing, and obviously since 2012 to now, our phones are even better. And then you could post everything straight away if you want to, or send them on to your family and friends. And so, do you need the big camera? Not necessarily. So,
one place you wished you'd stayed over and would recommend others do too?
I've spent a lot of time in Pamplona, but obviously not on my Camino, because though I did it before my Camino, I've never stopped there as a pilgrim. I've always walked straight through because I've always stayed the other side. And I think it's one of those places that I wish I'd stopped as a pilgrim now, though my partner comes from Pamplona, and now I get to spend a lot of time, and it's an amazing city.
Good food as well.
Yes, I wish I'd put it as part of my Camino, but I never class it as part of my Camino.
So make sure you stop in Pamplona. I would definitely do that too. I missed Pamplona the first time I went there because San Fermin was going on and it was a bit mad for my liking, but I definitely like. That's the name of your partner, isn't it? It's Fermin?
And he's born in Pamplona.
So you got a true Basque.
I do have a true Basque.
Right, okay. It's a nice mix of Australia and Basque.
Yeah.
Lots of fiery temperaments in there.
Glad you said it without me having to say the fire, but you've said it all.
I can tell. It's all good. Yeah. It's all good. It must be very entertaining in your house. Okay. An important word to learn in Spanish before you come over.
Gracias.
Hardest part of the Camino.
Finishing.
Why?
Because you miss it. Suddenly the loneliness and all these people that you've met have gone back to their homes and also feeling the same way you are, the loneliness.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the next place and you start looking at people and you think, why aren't these people saying hello to me? Why don't they recognise me? Don't they know me? It's like, no, probably not. They weren't on the Camino. And then talking to random strangers in the street who think you're probably crazy. So, yeah, the finishing was the hardest for me.
One of my favourite things about the Camino is the fact that it does bring the best out of us as people when we turn into pilgrims. I think we open up a lot more and we're a lot more, just open to talk to people and meeting strangers. What's your favourite thing about the Camino?
The people, absolutely the people that we meet every day and their stories, and yes, absolutely the openness, but the generosity of spirit of people. It gave me back my faith in humans from walking the Camino. Non-judgment, because we all look the same. We're all dressed in the same way. Well, most of us, and the ones that are not dressed the same way as us are probably, on some tour group, and that's fine. That's what they choose to do. But the ones that are just the regular pilgrims, we're all in the same situation. And even though those hard days of walking and then you might not get to the best albergue and not great sleeping conditions, there's still smile on people's faces and laughter and warmth. And, yeah, it's definitely the people.
And a guilty pleasure that you carried with you, maybe? Sounds like you had quite a few.
No, it was called mascara.
Right, okay.
That was it. It was purely as simple as that. And my lip gloss, but that was the only thing that I didn't really need, but I wanted.
Now, I'd like to dive a little bit into life as a Hospitalera. For those of you who don't know what that means, that's simply the word for warden in English, which I think is a bit of it sounds a lot harsher in English. I don't know if warden is a host. Let's go for host. The hostess with the mostess, Susi from Casa, Susi. What's the weirdest thing you've ever seen anyone carry with them on the Camino?
Snorkel and flippers.
Is that because they wanted to have a dip but finished there?
They decided, when they got to the end, they would be swimming in the ocean and they'd quite like them, but they had to carry that from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port.
They carried that all the way?
All the way.
That's really, really funny.
Yep.
And What would you say of the pilgrims that come into Casa, Susi? What would you say is the most common mistake you see among pilgrims?
You know what? We're 173 kilometres before the end. So by the time most people get to us, they've been going, a good 3 weeks. And I think when they get to us, we're in the absolutely perfect position for most pilgrims for that reason, because they've settled, they've done all their mistakes. They figured out everything they don't need or what they do need. So when they get to us, we're at the stage where they're discovering, like, their bodies have adjusted, they've sorted out all their crazy thoughts in their mind because they've done the meseta and they've got to us, they've left their rocks in the Cruz de Ferro. So by the time they've got to us, they're in that spiritual side of their Camino, because it goes in that 3 parts. And we don't see many mistakes that come to us. So we get the pleasure of these people almost coming out of a cocoon. We sometimes almost like this rebirth.
They've blossomed. Yeah,
absolutely. And for that reason, we are totally blessed. And for the same reason that they've been travelling that long, they actually appreciate what we're doing at Casa Susi in terms of it feeling like home cooking, nurturing, love, suddenly being able to speak to somebody in English that understands them. Fermin also speaks Basque, Spanish, perfect English, perfect English. And he's got a bit of everything going on.
Right.
That helps as well.
Yeah, I mean, talking of what people are saying about Casa Susi, I've done a bit of research on some reviews, and just to paraphrase a few people, they say, I felt at home straight away. The welcome was terrific. Vegetables from their own garden, comfortable and clean, live music and singing. So you got a little gig scene going on there in the mountains. This is the most amazing albergue. There are many albergues on the Camino. This one is the best. This is just quotes I've lifted from the reviews on Google. What's the secret, Susi?
Single beds. We've got single beds. We don't have bunks. I think that's one of the things that everybody comes in, and we love to trick people at times, because when they come in, we've got a big entry space, which is where we do our communal meal every night, and then the door's normally closed for the privacy of the pilgrims that are behind that door. So we've got just one space. We've got 2. So I did all the renovations myself. So I gave the albergue everything I wanted as a pilgrim. So I could start from the very beginning. I had an open space. It was a barn. So for that reason, we've given everything we wanted, and I don't think you can go wrong with that. So we've got 2 bathrooms. You get a big rain head shower, sink and a toilet all to yourself. You just lock yourself in. It's a really big space, which is great. And then we've got 12 single beds, so no bunks. And so people go, I'd sort of really like a bottom. We go, oh, yeah, I think they're all gone. When you go through, you just have to check, and then you hear screams of delight from people, which is, heartwarming for us. And we've got a relaxation area. So we've walked the Camino. We understand what it is to be a pilgrim, and maybe not every albergue wants to walk there. A Hospitalera wants to walk the Camino or do those things, or they've just opened it for whatever reason, and they don't understand a pilgrim and the needs. And I think you have to. Was the reason that you walked so many Caminos because you were doing research about opening an albergue? Absolutely. And I didn't realise that until the 3rd Camino, when these mental notes, I think we've all walked with people beside you going, if I had an albergue, I would do it this way. We hear it all the time. Yeah. And I was probably one of those. But I realised on the 3rd one, I was learning a trade. So I was a florist for 30 years. That was my only job. And I loved it. I was very passionate about it, and lucky I was very successful at it. Never thought I was going to change until suddenly I realised, actually, I'd like to do this. And I think then I needed to learn everything I could about it and what I wanted. And so a lot of that walking was purely I was learning the knowledge of having an albergue, pilgrims, walking a Camino, and human beings and what they wanted as well. That's why I walked through France and also Portugal, just in case those countries dragged me in to do something in those countries. But Spain always brought me back, and the Camino Francés always drew me there.
All right, so you've travelled so many Caminos and covered so many miles. Why did you choose that spot in particular in Trabadillo? And I'd like you, if you don't mind, to explain to the listeners where geographically you are on the Camino and where they can pinpoint and plan a stay with you.
So I was very open to where I was going to be. When I decided it was going to be in Spain and I was, walking Caminos, it was very difficult looking on the net to find things. And I think anybody that's walked Camino, you see a lot of se vende, which is for sale. But when you phone up about them, suddenly they're not for sale. Oh, well, I sort of thought I'd put the sign, and my sister doesn't really want to sell unless you want to offer us a really lot of money, and that might encourage her. And so they're not always for sale when they say se vende. So I sort of gave up a bit on that, just kept walking and trying pretty much. And I'd given myself 2 years. I'd had to give myself a time limit for the simple reason the money that I had would have run out. And so I kept everything in storage in Sydney and gave myself 2 years of travelling and looking. And so I did, internet searching and everything else. And I had found a real estate agent in Santiago who was an amazing friend, but the worst real estate ever. Found me wonderful properties 5 kilometres off the Camino and hadn't walked the Camino, so didn't understand when I said, it's too far. No, it's not. It's amazing. They'll walk. It's like they've just walked 30 kilometres or 20 or 15. They don't want to do another 5. Maybe I'm not there at the end of 5. We all know if the sign says 100 metres, if you can't see it, you're not going to do it. I mean, you don't do any more steps than you have to do.
It's got to be right on the Camino, isn't it? Ideally.
Absolutely. And so that is, you have to go looking for that. And so on month 20 of looking, I was on my last walk back to Santiago. So I'd come so the valley I live in is in Bathe. That's what our little valley is called. There's 7 villages. And Villafranca del Bierzo is at one end. And at the other end is the mountain to Osobrero. So we're 173 kilometres from Santiago. Ponferrada is our closest main town, which is after you come off the cruise to Faro. Most people stay there. And we're 32 kilometres from Ponferrada. So this little valley is a microclimate, and it's surrounded by 3 mountain ranges. It is incredibly beautiful, and there's a stream that runs all the way through it, which also runs at the bottom of our garden. So we have a little pier under a bridge where people go to swim or just to put their feet in the icy cold mountain water. And so when it's very hot, it's a little hub of people enjoying the outdoor space. We have a big garden as well with the veggie patches. So I had gone to look at a property, not actually in Trabadillo where I am. It was in a different village, Las Herrerias, which is where the horses go up to Osobrero. And I loved the house. It was missing a floor between the 2 levels, and it didn't have a garden, and I sort of wanted the garden. And I thought, you know what, this is it. I'm going to go back to Sydney. I'm going to walk to Santiago, fly to London, fly to Sydney. Why not walk from Villafranca back to Santiago, my last go? So I got everything in Santiago. A week later, went back in Villafranca and was going to walk the next day when the bad real estate agent, who's my mate, called and said, where are you? I said, I'm in Villafranca. He said, I found your house. You're going to see it tomorrow. And it was in Trabadillo, and I did find my house, and I knew straight away. So though I had viewed many properties, they were never quite right. But I walked into this one with my neighbour, who at the time was 82. And when we met in the street, not knowing each other like languages, we cried when we met. And I thought, even if I don't like the house, I'll probably buy it because I love her. And it was a big barn, an open space, and I could see the vision of that. And then we walked up the stairs, and though it was very, very basic, there actually was a home there that I could live in straight away. So it had a toilet that flushed amazing at one point. It had power upstairs. I could turn on the light and it worked. and there was 3 gas rings, so I could cook. So I could live there within the space and start the renovation of the property. And basically, it was all over within 6 weeks. Everything was side sealed, delivered, paid for. I was back in Australia getting my things out of storage, and I got an email from my solicitor to say, "You own a house," and that was it, all done.
And the rest is history.
Absolutely.
Now, you are, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, if my memory serves me right, but you're in a bit of a strategically clever place as well, because I think, are you on the way up O Sobrero? Or am I wrong?
Yes, we're 19 kilometres from the top.
So if anyone doesn't want to do that massive hike all the way up, they could stay at yours and break up that climb, can't they?
And we do get a lot of that.
Yeah.
So it's 10 to the bottom, 12 to the bottom actually, and it's 7 up. Right. It's not that bad. And we get lots of people coming and going, how are we going to manage? And we laugh and we go, if you walk from St. John Peter Paul, this is a breeze. And if you started the day before in Ponferrada, maybe you're going to have a few problems. Just go slow. Yeah. But absolutely, it's not as bad as anybody thinks it is. And we talk about this at dinner, and we tell everybody the best way about going about doing it. But yeah, from us, it's a good, nice, easy walk to the bottom. You got 7 Ks up, and you're rewarded by this amazing view from this village. So yeah, it's 19 Ks, but you'd be thinking you've got to add the extra hour or so on for that mountain climb. So yeah, we get a lot of people for that reason, resting up before they start the climb.
So you found your ideal property. How long have you actually had it now, Susie?
So I started the renovations in 2016, and Casa Susi was opened in 2017. So we're about to go into season 4.
Right. So, and it's open only in the spring and summer. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we pretty much go through mid-April to late October, depending on what the weather's doing. I mean, there's the winter Camino, so there's albergues that are listed under the winter guide, and every 15, 20, 25 kilometres there's an albergue. The one in our village, the first one, is open in winter, so it was pointless to have 2 open. And really at the end of the season, when we're quite tired and we need to do maintenance, it's, time to close. And we don't have heating within the house, though the Pilgrim space does have an amazing pellet heater, which warms it really well and very cosy. But we really wouldn't want our pilgrims at the front entry having dinner in -5.
Yeah, the weather can be really harsh there, I guess, in the winter, can't it? So, it'd be a tough one for you guys as well. And just another question I have asked on my last Camino, a few of the hospitaleros in the municipal places, that how can a pilgrim help the hospitaleros and hospitaleras along the way?
Because our home is our home, we work slightly different. So when people come in, if they want to help, for Min, I normally do the cooking for dinner. So he lays a table. People want to feel like they're doing something to help you, and they want to feel a bit at home. So he often gets them. He has a particular way of laying the table. We're a bit fancy about that because it's special for us. And so he often gets pilgrims to help him lay the table or fold the napkins. Because we have the big garden, the veggie patch, people say, can we help? And we might get, a group together to come and help us do the watering, which is really important. Or something might need to be moved and we will grab a pilgrim. So people want to feel useful when they're there. I suppose in a municipal, people have their ways about what they do. Maybe they're just there on a 2-week call to be there. So they've got 2 weeks and they know they've got to do their check-in and their check-outs and show somebody the bed. So maybe it's a bit different there. But try and leave the place the way you found it. If you have a shower, if there's a mop and bucket there, it's there for a reason. Just mop it up and have it ready for the next person to go in the same way as you went in. And a smile goes a long way from us to you, and also the reverse. And we understand sometimes when you get there, you just you've had enough. And it's amazing when people eventually find their bed and have had a shower, how they change. And that's like,
yeah, they just before they do anything, they just need to have a wash and a shower and put a new clothes on, and maybe put their what's that brand of flip flop called that you mentioned, Birkenstocks. Put their Birkenstocks on. Just going through my notes there. And one thing I've seen in a lot of albergues is pilgrims leave stuff behind that maybe those coming up behind them might find useful. If they are going to leave anything behind, what would you say would be something that could be useful, or something you often find left behind?
It's funny because we laugh about that we're not in the best place for the left behind things. You know, in the first week, people are leaving things all over the place.
Yeah.
In terms, I need to make my bag lighter, and for me, it's very exciting when someone says, "Oh, I don't need this anymore," and they give it to us, and maybe it fits him, and he can get to keep that, and that's brilliant. So, which I always find amusing. So we're not in the best place for. We've got a clothing bin. They actually call it. It's the old animal cooker that's still downstairs. It's a feature. It's a big copper bin, and anything that people want to pass on to the next person, we put there. So, obviously we get chargers, hats, sunglasses. People might be overdoing their waterproofs, they get left behind. We find so many towels. That's probably the one that everybody leaves behind. We go down in the morning and go, how many towels have we got today? And they're on the washing line. But it's good because I end up putting them in the wash. And when someone walks in, normally that day, and say, I left my towel, I go, it's okay, I have one of those. And the sticks, that's for Min's collection. The last thing at night when we tell everybody about what happens in the morning, where to find the light, how they can get their breakfast, and being considerate to others if they're leaving extremely early, like come into the entry and close the door to keep the people sleeping, because we have quite a peaceful house. And the sticks are by the door, and he always goes, and don't forget your sticks, because what happens sometimes when they've closed the door and they've gone outside, they ring our bell because they've forgotten their sticks. So sometimes at 5:30 in the morning, we may be getting a ringing of a bell to say they've forgotten sticks. So, for us, sticks and towels are the biggest things that are left behind. But if you don't need it, you're absolutely best to leave it in an albergue so that the people that are running them can pass them on to the next people that come through.
Where can the listeners find Casa Susi online?
So we've got a great Facebook page. I'm not very good at social media, but my Facebook page is pretty good, and Instagram. So it's Casa Susi, and the Susi is SUSI. If you need to put in Trabadello, you'll find us from that as well. They're the best places. Or Google Business. We're still under Casa Susi on that as well. I'm just getting the hang of that. But there's a lot of reviews on there and lots of photos from people that have stayed with us. So that's really good. Email address would be alberguecasasusi, SUSI, @gmail.com. And then all the other.
That's where you can find Casa Susi. And from everything you've heard in this podcast, it sounds like it oozes warmth, hospitality, and most importantly, personality. And that's what I will take away from speaking to you, Susi, that the fact that you just put all that love and attention to detail, and the fact that you've actually walked the Camino, so you know exactly what a pilgrim wants and needs when they walk through your door. You're ready with all of those things equipped to make everyone feel at home. Just to say to you as a thank you, I'm going to send you a copy via email of my book, The Only Way is West. So if you want to read it, if you ever need some time filling and get your feet up in the winter, you're more than welcome to read that. And I just want to say forever, thank you so much for your time. Buen Camino, fellow peregrina.
See you, Brad. Bye.
Wanderer, a life adventurer, said he's a secrets philosopher. He's a wandering wanderer. Uh-huh.